If you don't know what to do and you're stuck, then let's go help people. Let's call the people. Do you need help? Are you okay? Do you need us to check your home? Those kinds of conversations are what people remember.
Welcome to the Mega Team Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, John Tiller. In each episode, we have dynamic conversations with industry powerhouses, mega team leaders, coaches, and other thought leaders who are shaping the future of real estate teams. This podcast is brought to you by megateammentor.com, where you can get a free, detailed assessment of your real estate team's health, including a free customized scorecard that will quickly and objectively diagnose the strengths and weaknesses of your real estate team business. Now, let's get started on the journey of growth, impact, and legacy building with today's episode. Welcome back to the Mega Team Mastermind Podcast, where we interview successful real estate mega team leaders who will inspire you by sharing real-world stories of success and failure, building profitable real estate teams that both make an impact and leave a legacy. I'm your host, John Tiller, and today I'm so excited to have Mary Bartos from Southwest Florida joining us. Mary is Realtor, Chief Executive Officer, and Lead Agent of the Bartos Group at Premier Plus Realty in Southwest Florida. Mary's team sold $270 million in 316 transactions in 2023. So she knows a little bit about what she's doing there in Southwest Florida. Mary co-owns her team of 30 agents and 15 staff with her husband and COO, Joe. Mary, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So let's kick it off. Why don't you tell us about key parts of your story in real estate and your journey to get where you are today with your team and leadership of your team?
I'm probably no different than anybody else. I started in 2010 after a successful career in software sales and was an engineer in my early days and wanted to live in Southwest Florida. So real estate seemed to be the right place. And when I started, John, unfortunately, there was a Gulf oil spill. So about a week after I left my lucrative position and I took the summer off and thought, I had 3 little kids. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to do something different for the summer. And then we came out of that. And that was in 2010. So now we are here 14-ish years later. And we've grown a large team. We've got 3 locations, Marco, Naples, and Fort Myers, where we have our offices. And we go from Marco, Naples, Bonita, Fort Myers, and Cape Coral in our market areas.
Wow, that is such a starting story for your journey. My last day of full-time salaried employment in banking before I got into real estate was September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
And so the same kind of thing, right? Where there's this huge economic driver that you know is going to affect this new self-employed business that you're in. I know why I stayed in. Why did you say, oh my gosh, this may kill the market here, but I know I'm in the right place and I'm going to keep going?
Yeah, good question. I was not going to travel anymore. I traveled a third of the country when I moved here and 3 little kids. And I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to figure it out.
Good for you.
I'll do whatever. When I tell my team I walked uphill both ways in the snow to get to school for 2 miles. In essence, I would sit and dial until I spoke to 20 people. And then, because what else was I going to do? I wasn't going on appointments. And I better get the dials in the conversations. And then your skills get better and it all flows from there.
That's so good. That's so good. You did it because you had to do it. And it sounds like determination has been a big guiding principle since 2010. Tell me about, because there's a big difference between starting with the Gulf oil spill, dialing and talking to 20 people a day, and then getting all the way to 3 locations with 30 agents and 15 staff and hundreds of millions of dollars in production. Tell us a little bit about that journey of 2010 until now.
Well, it's never easy, John. It's kind of like step by step. We knew we wanted a team, my husband and I did, that we wanted to grow something. And we live on Marco Island where we were living when we started the team and where we still live. And we were like, well, let's figure this out. So the first year, it was nothing more than do everything the broker said, which was the advice I got was open houses. So I did them 4 days a week in my market in the winter. People don't work. It's our second home. So I did that. That wasn't really all that successful. So I decided I had to figure out something. So I hired a coach, and I coached with another company. And we have step by step through that, then moved out of our home, moved into an office, a small office, moved into a bigger office, moved into a bigger office. And when we had Irma, which was in 2017, so 10 to 17, I evacuated, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have a business or a house when I return. What the heck am I doing? Like, wow. I need to have something different. So we decided at that time in 17 that we were going to go north and away from the water and try to get more of a full-time, the reason why people buy divorce, diapers, diplomas, etc. At that time, right. Business versus second home. And then after that, we hit the pandemic. And in every office, I don't know, John, if you have the same experience, but I open something, we think we have the right group, we get going, and it's not the right group, and we start all over again. So I would say every office that I open, and maybe I'm just silly, so I don't know, I didn't learn from the last time, I have to go through this learning curve. And some of it was major storms, pandemic. We just went through a couple storms recently. And yes. Each one is, okay, what are you going to do to pivot to come through this? And how are you going to change? And some people will curl up in a ball. I'm really good at working, so I just work it out.
I love that. There's so much there that you've learned through that. So there's lots of us who have opened multiple, we're like, hey, multiple offices sounds great. Like, let's go do that. And then you open it and you're like, why did I open that office? And we call it the face slap when we were like, oh my gosh, that was a bad idea. They're sucking all the profit that I was making out of my other office. And so you've done that 3 times, and you certainly have learned lessons along the way. And certainly it hasn't been perfect. I'm guessing that maybe it's been a little bit better, and you've grown and learned a little bit each time. What would you say were your biggest leadership lessons on how to do expansion properly versus based on the experience that you've had?
I don't know that there's one way to do it properly, but I will tell you the way that we do it is we hire a team, individuals that are going to want to office in that new location. So we'll attract to that. And then once they've got some production and they've been taught the Bartos Group way, so to speak.
Yes.
Then we go and find real estate. And once we get the real estate, then they roll into that. When I say we have to do it a couple of times, is sometimes if you're not in that office on a regular basis, you don't hear what's going on, or you know who you hired and what they actually do are 2 different things. Yes. So you just got to keep your ear to the ground. And my husband doesn't office now in any location, but he will move to different locations so that he can he doesn't do it every week, but his whole job is to make sure those are moving along smoothly. So he does. Our structure is we have a regional person that agents flow up to, so they got a minute in our accountability, and then he gives them their accountability and their direction. So our goal is to get that messaging out and to make sure that it's homogeneous to the content. So if you walk into the Bartos Group in Marco, it's the same as what you're going to walk into, and the same type of output we're going to give and experience and deliverables in Fort Myers, even though they're about 45 an hour away from each other.
That makes perfect sense. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So we've all dealt with, those of us who have done expansion, we've dealt with losing the DNA of the office is one way that we say it, right? So they don't have, you call it the Bartos experience. Like they say, it sounds like, and they nod their head, they sound like great people, sound like great culture fits. But the truth is maybe they just didn't know the culture. And one of your ways to solve it is to have your husband there, have somebody present on site. Are your regional managers, are they ever new to the team, or were they raised up from the existing culture?
Mostly raised through the existing culture. I mean, we have one gentleman that was such a good culture fit, and he's in Fort Myers, that it made sense, but he was replacing somebody that wasn't there. that was there before that had been raised and just wasn't a good fit. Again, if you're not there every day, you're not really sure until you hear the stories later of what happened. And they, were like, did you know? And I'm like, no, I didn't. Would you mind? You could have told me that before. But I'd say we're in a good spot now with the 3 offices. Good. How we do expansion from here is a different story. Our intention is to be $1 billion and to march up the coast of Florida. But we'll see how that plays out.
Well, and so let me ask you another question along those lines, because you talked about you want to make sure that it's the same experience, whichever office they're in. But of course, depending on who you ask, it's maybe different percentages. But real estate is 80% local, 20% national, right? And of course, regional is probably somewhere in the middle there. And so, but a Fort Myers culture, even though it's the Bartos team culture, it might be different than, say, the Naples culture, like people in different areas. And especially if, and I don't know what's different about the different towns that you're in, but in towns that we've expanded into, in almost every town, there's a little bit of just a different feel. Especially, it sounds like you were talking about having an office in a primarily secondary home market versus a primary home market, diapers and diplomas versus vacation homes. And so how do you decide what's okay to keep about the local culture? And it's okay to be different, in other words, in an office? Or is it like, hey, it's 100%, and not to devalue it all, but McDonald's is like the most famous example, right? If I order a Big Mac in California, I get the same Big Mac in Virginia, right? Is it 100% the same experience, or do you find any local variations between your offices?
Everybody's individual, so you're not going to clone me into somebody else. But where the benefit of that is, we want to make sure the things that are coming out of their mouths of all of our mouths are similar. Every day we have huddles or training or local meetings, because again, we're spread about, so we're on Zoom. And the goal of that is to make sure that the language is all the same. Now, how they deliver it, who they are, that's an individual. Somebody that's selling $10 million homes versus somebody that's selling an average $200,000 home, it's a different kind of look and feel to the person. And we want that person, each of them, to be their own. But what they're saying is going to be crafted for the messaging of the client. And we want to make sure we're teaching them that messaging. As far as an experience also that goes in, all services are at the high level. The company offers that. So marketing is all done at a central location. Agent support for us, which is our agents get all of their appointments scheduled for buy sides through our services that we do. We write all their contracts so that we make sure that they're consistent. As a team, all those go under my husband's name. He's a broker, so even my own business goes under his name. And our goal of all of that is to be consistent. Listings are brought at the central location. We have people that will go out, but that helps, that whole layer helps with the language, and then the accountability. We have accountability with each person every week. And that's where they've got additional questions, or how do we do this, or how do we do that? Again, individual, but we want to make sure that experience comes through.
That's incredible. Now tell me about your brokerage. You don't own the brokerage, right? You guys own the team under but it is an independent brokerage, right? Not a franchise or a national brokerage. Mm-hmm. But tell me about the partnership that you have with them, and why it sounds like you've been with them for a while, and it sounds like you have a good integration between your team and the support that they provide. Many teams, they really don't look to the broker to provide any level of support, but it sounds like your brokerage is providing some of that, your independent brokerages.
They provide some. They provide software for accounting, right?
Sure.
They pay like everybody else at the brokerage level. We have software that we use for workflow for all the different contracts we have. Our agents don't enter it. Our agent support, which is our personal employees, do that.
Got it.
But there's 1,800 agents at this brokerage. It's the largest regional, and it's one of the top 80s because they were over $2 billion. So with NAR, they had to unfortunately pay a settlement separately than NAR did. NAR kind of, along with Compass and Caldwell and everybody else, they were in the bucket of that. And it's great because the president and I talk on a very regular basis. And there's not a lot of money at the brokerage because it is 100% brokerage. So
Got it.
we pay and processing fees at the time of the transaction. And that's split with our agents based on what the splits are. And it works really well for our model because it allows our agents to make more money. So say, for example, team that I compete with on a regular basis, they are at a high end 6% off. And then there's another 15 or so % off of that.
Right.
And then if they're in Zillow and they have Flex, that's another 35 or 40% off of that.
Sure.
By the time that and the split with the team, they're making like 20%.
Right.
And
Agent.
the agent, and we want our agents to make as much money as they possibly can.
Gotcha.
So depending on the type of lead and where that's coming from and how much they've sold, they can make a good percentage of the money that they're bringing in and take it home. And that's part of our core values, is to help them grow or die. So our job is to help them grow.
Love it. I love that. Grow or die, because nobody's staying the same.
Mm-mm.
That's fantastic. So that's a unique, or rare anyway, that your staff writes the contracts for your agents. But what a brilliant solution for consistency. And it really kind of enables your agents to have this high level of support and get those contracts written correctly. Have you always done it that way, or did you transition to that from having agents write their own contracts?
We've pretty much always done it that way.
Okay.
How we're rolling it out is different. So we have staff that works 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then 9 until 8 on Saturday and Sunday.
Gotcha.
And so they're always available. And we grew our own systems for how they can enter that. And they can enter it from their phone, they can enter it from a computer or iPad. And it's basically asking them through a series of questions so that they can do it. And then what the staff does is they put it into the system that's more cumbersome to use. And they're making sure that tax ID numbers are pulled out of a different system. And if there's any attachments, they're pulling all that together. And then the way that our company's system works is the agent can review it, make sure it's right. If it's not, it goes back to our staff member and it'll go back through the iterations. And then when it's finally ready, it can either be printed or sent for e-signature. And I will tell you that it's funny because, John, I have a client that was an investor, and I don't show as many buyers as I once did. I love buyers, so I love them. But my job is to be in the office and to get sellers and to make sure that we get their home sold. And so he was out with me one day and he goes, I want to see that house. And I said, okay, well, let me call on the sign, right? Let me call. The sign was ridiculous. So we're in the car and I'm like, let me just call. They couldn't help me. They weren't going to get me into the house.
Right.
So I called my support person and I said to her, Maria, would you please check to see if you can get us into this house? And within 5 minutes, as we're walking around outside, she got the approval for us to go inside. And so he's subsequently, because he does enough business with me, he's like, I'm getting my own license and you can help me, but I'm going to hang it with you because I like all your systems.
Absolutely.
And it's true because you're out there, as we all started at some point as a single agent, and you're trying to get the job done and you're wearing a lot of hats and you're trying to move quickly and manage whatever business you can manage at that time. And, it's not always easy. Like I would get into the car, and this is a little off topic, but when I drove around a lot, and I would say to my client, who I like to have people in my car because we can talk and I can, that I can show them places that are different for the house and give some color to that, ask questions, get to know them. So we became friends. But before I put it into gear, I'd say, okay, now driving is a team sport and you're part of the team. So if you find me doing something wrong, if I'm going to hit something or I'm going through a red light, I'm expecting you to say something. And they'd laugh kind of nervously. And then at the first dinner where we celebrated them buying, we joke about my driving inabilities. And, but isn't that the case? You got your mind cluttered. You're doing a million things, trying to get it together. And it's so nice to have somebody that I can just call. Now, I also have an assistant who fills that role as well, that I can text or call and say, from my car, everything's on speaker these days, Hey, Bailey, say hello to Mr. Smith. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hey, could you find this and this? I will use every single tool I have so that I can make the most of the time I have, whether that's individually selling or running the team.
That makes perfect sense. What a great next level kind of white glove support for your agents. That's fantastic. So tell me about you've talked a little bit about, hey, I work with buyers when I can now. My job is to get sellers and get those listed and be in the office, which I take it means leadership. What specifically do you spend the most of your time on? What are your roles, and what would you consider your superpower in the business as a team leader?
Getting things done. So whether that's solving a problem for a client, whatever that is, that's why people like to work with me specifically. I just had a client this week, and he goes, he's buying a place, he's double ending one of our other agents' listings, and he's like, let me know what about this, because we're in a hiccup problem. I'm like, well, let me just make a few calls. And the few calls turned into solving the problem. So I think that's what I'm really good at, whether it's an agent solving a problem. And I don't do a lot of the got-a-minute questions. For me, 60 to 70% of my time is spent on helping people sell or buy, mostly sell. And that's talking to them, that's working with other agents, negotiating, et cetera. And all those are superpowers too, because I think your skills expand as the work that you take on does. And then the other, whatever that is, 30% or so, that's running the business. We talked about my title being CEO, but I'm really a visionary. We use entrepreneurial operating system.
Yeah, sure. Gino Wickman, yep.
And I'm the visionary. My husband's the integrator. And my job in that is to say, okay, how are we going to pivot? What are we going to do? Like, we just ran through 2 storms. It's an election year. We're light on sales this year as we sit today. So what are we going to do to that? How are we going to make those adjustments? What do we need to do? Looking at where our leads are, what are our agents doing with the leads? What can we do better? What do we need to do different? Those are the things that keep me up at night, more so than the buyers and sellers these days. But that is where I'm spending the majority of my time.
That makes perfect.
I carry in high season, maybe personally, with my son, who's my partner in crime, we carry probably 60 or 70 listings personally.
Gotcha.
And so talking to those folks, making sure that they're okay on a weekly basis or every other week, getting the price improvements. My staff does the feedback. I don't have to do any of that. That's all taken care of. They're calling, making sure all that's done. But that you have to still have a conversation with somebody.
Sure. Now, on EOS, there's some people that implement EOS with just the book. It's like, hey, we'll get traction. We'll get what's the Visionary Integrator book called? Anyway, the book that describes visionary and integrator relationships. They work just off the books. And then some people hire a coach that is certified in EOS, an implementer. Which way did you guys go with that?
Well, when the book didn't work, because we read Traction, and we hired a coach. We're really good at hiring coaches. And he came in, his name is Ross, he's out of Florida. And he came in for maybe the first year for every quarter. And then we decided at that time, because that was in about 22, and decided, and I don't know how your business or folks that are listening's business was in 22, but it was sailing along until the stock market crashed somewhere around, and crash is a big word, but somewhere around April, and the wheels came off. And we had drank the Kool-Aid because in COVID, we were up to, 50 agents, right? A lot of them knew. We had a very expensive director of sales. We brought a trainer on. We had all this staff, and the wheels came off. And I'm like, they either have to perform and figure out how to get this turned around, or we have to start moving on differently. And we chose to move on differently. And EOS, we decided we could implement the rest on our own. Now, had we kept a trainer, Ross, if you're out there listening, love you, maybe be in a different place. But we got enough of the fundamentals, and then it's about executing. So our L10 meetings are every week. Today, we're recording this on a Wednesday, and in the afternoon, our L10 is 10 to 11:30 every Wednesday with our executive team. And then once a quarter, we do, our quarterlies, and then we do where we set our rocks, and then we do our annual. And we're very enthusiastic about what we're going to do. And then we pull it back in the covers and we look at the end of the quarter, and maybe we're a little too enthusiastic for what we got accomplished. So we're trying to figure that out as it relates.
Well, yeah. And EOS trains that you should hit 80% of your rocks, right? And if you're not hitting 80%, you're probably a little too enthusiastic. And if you're hitting 100%, you're probably not enthusiastic enough. And so we all try to find that balance for sure.
That's right.
For sure. So tell me about, you've been through so many lessons through the up market, the down market, a completely different market in 2020s, in the early 2020s versus the last 2 or 3 years. And tell me about your biggest leadership lesson learned. You touched on one that was really tough there with, hey, we have all this staff while things were running kind of haywire. It was just, everybody, all hands on deck because everybody wants to buy and sell a house, and then it slowed down. I don't know if that was it, or tell me about what your biggest leadership lesson was learned specifically.
Probably about after a storm. Storms are tough because whether you get hit, you still have to work. You still have to get your stuff together, and your team has to keep moving because you still have costs, and you better figure it out fast, and you better get back up, and you better not go and drag on, because if you do, they will. And if they do, you got to figure out how to, move them along, because it is, we typically takes us about 3 to 4 months to get out of a storm. And you should think I would bake that into my budget every year. I don't know why. I'm thinking every year it's a good year, but after that storm, this year, I think they're going to have a little, we'll get past the election, because there's going to be the most important thing in their mind, and we'll get past that and the storm will go away. But if you get a hit in September, October, and you're like half of your run rate, you better figure out how to turn that around. And half of that battle is to get your team moving, because with Ian and Fort Myers, it devastated it, horrible.
Yeah.
But the investors came in. So once the investors come in, right, you got to work with them, because investors want to do it fast, and they don't care. There's no emotion. It's just give me the deal fastest. But you can't have your agents driving down, a devastated area and feeling the feels every day. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge.
So do you find that when you coach agents that, man, this is hard, but we have to pivot, we have to move forward, here's what we're doing to do it? And by the way, thank you for being vulnerable enough to show the emotion that goes along with that, because I don't think any of us who haven't been through that can possibly understand. I think most of us know we can't understand it, but we just can't possibly understand it. And that must be one of the things that makes you great in your market, is that you actually do care, like you care. And that's what a devastating blow. But do you have agents who just don't make it after something, who just can't pivot? And then what do you do? Do you manage them out? Ideally they would self-select if that happens. How do you handle that?
We coach up. We work to coach up, and we just know that we don't, as soon as you can have electricity and you can have phone service and you can have Zoom again, you're talking to them and making sure, hey, are you okay? What do you need? How can we help? I don't know that after a storm, we've necessarily had people that left, because you have to everybody's going to walk through that at their pace. I love Zig Ziglar. And if you recall, I'm pretty sure he'd say you get baked or cooked in the squat, right? So you just don't raise up. My dad, and I'm not sure who he got it from. If you can look up, you can get up. You just have to go keep getting on. And I just try to teach that to them, that this is okay. This isn't something that's, we're going to just move through it. The investors are going to come in. So if we're afraid of our income, then let's go find an investor. If you don't know what to do and you're stuck, then let's go help people. Let's call the people. Do you need help? Are you okay? Do you need us to check your home? Those kinds of conversations are what people remember. And it's not necessarily, hey, do you need to sell it because it got damaged? It's, hey, are you okay? Do you need some help? I mean, in Ian, we helped people find resources to demuck. So if you can only think about what demucking is, that your home got flooded, and you cut out the drywall, and churches would come in and help people that didn't have the resources themselves to do that.
Sure.
And so we were trying to pull together those resources, or clothes or furniture or whatever it was. That was after Ian. Irma, I wasn't as big. So with Irma, we were trying, and that was in 17. I was trying to, the office that I'm in right now, the roof came off. Now, fortunately, my space was okay, but we were out of the office for 6 weeks. And we worked from my dining room table. So I guess for us, storms are probably, to answer, John, your question, probably the biggest thing. We pivoted in COVID, and I'm a big believer in keep in front of the team, keep in front of them. Even with the regional sales leaders, they need to hear from me. They need to, daily.
That makes so much sense, to keep in front of the team. And I would venture to say that your culture I think culture is built out of hard times, and your culture has been uniquely built out of those hard times. And my next question seems insignificant compared to life-threatening storms, but related to our business, not life-threatening, but a storm in our business is the NAR settlement, right? And so tell me about how that has affected your team or not, and what you see for how the future is different, both for your team and the industry as a result of the settlement.
We started prepping our team in January before August, because we knew it was going to happen. I started talking about it for a year before it happened. And then we started to do, because in Florida, we were not doing buyer broker agreements.
Gotcha.
So I started them doing that and having those conversations. Clearly, we didn't have all the forms. The forms changed a million times. And as we approached August 17th, our MLS, we belong to 2 boards, they moved it back to the end of July and August when I was on vacation. So we have a director of operations, and she was who is a broker. And so she was responsible for getting that out. And I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm going to say with that, I'm pleasantly surprised, because yes, not all my team was doing buyer broker, even though I was talking to them about it. There was no feedback loop for me to see where that was. But now they are, and it's not as hard as they thought. And honestly, some of my sellers were still pivoting on how to have those conversations on whether they want 0 to infinity, and if they want 0, what we need to do with the price, on compensation for the buyer's agent. And we're just moving through it. I mean, if the JOD comes back and says, I don't know how they can, in their infinite glory, tell somebody this to lose their rights. But if they said sellers can no longer pay compensation, that'd be fine. I mean, in essence, my team is moving along.
We'd figure it out.
And if you ask them, truth be told, they're probably making more money because what they're signing the buyer broker agreement for, and then whose responsibility is what.
So you can foresee a net positive in the overall issue.
I really do. When I was envisioning it before, I was not visioning that. I was thinking that we would go to mostly to listing agents, and people would only want to work with them, and therefore we'd have more compensation compression than I think we're having.
Sure.
I don't know if that's going to come out that way, but what I do know is the harder it is, the more agents will fall out. And when they fall out, there's more business for my team.
There's more business for the team, and there's more business for high-end professionals, and people pay for good. And so I love that perspective. That makes a lot of sense. So around here, as we kind of start to wrap up, we talk a lot about impact and legacy. You've already talked about the impact of your team and the team and what your team makes in your community, the impact that it makes in your community. I'd love to know, Mary, when you and your husband, as you're doing your annual EOS meetings and you're revisiting your vision traction organizer and you're looking at your vision, do you guys talk about legacy, and whether or not however you talk about that, maybe use those words or not, but what do you see as, number one, your team's legacy, and then number two, Mary and Joe's legacy? What do you want that to be for the long term?
Yeah, well, it's going to morph. I have an ego, so my ego is to get to $1 billion. We all have to have something, I guess. My coach just challenged me on that. Like, is that really what you want, or do you want something different? So I'm kind of in this place where I've got a lot of thoughts to think about. Fortunately for us, our son Cole is going to take over the business. He's really good. He's better than I am ever at that age. I'm not going to say that he's better than I am today. I don't want him to hear this. But so we're really blessed that way. And we have an operator, and, assuming that all still goes well, she will take over from my husband. So the business will go on. And really what happens today in the next 5 to 10 years before I want to go and just spread fairy dust on everyone and come in and love on them instead of doing, and maybe doing much less business than I do now. That's going to really kind of depend on them. So, I would say, John, that we're in a time of thinking about this and I hope everyone is, for us, we dust it off every year. Like, okay, do we still believe in the same thing? Do we still hit in the same way? Because we want to change lives, whether it's, our families, our customers or our agents, in whatever order that is.
Sure.
That's what we want. That's part of them. And on my board that you can't see, it has my why, right?
Yeah.
So I have whiteboards all around me. You can't see them in my office here in Marco Island. And I hope that everyone takes their why and then marries it to what they're doing, and on a day-to-day decides, and at least on an annual, is this still what I want to do, or do I want to do it differently? Because at this size, or bigger, there's a lot of people that are bigger. The biggest thing are the people challenges. Sure. And, that whether your clients or the agents or whatever, smaller has less challenges, bigger has bigger challenges. And so what does that look like for everybody?
What is your why that's written on those whiteboards? You have us curious now.
You thought you'd make me cry before, but that would definitely make me cry. Changing lives. I want to leave a legacy for my kids and my grands. Someday I'll have I have a wedding coming up in a year plus with one of my sons. I only have sons, and his fiance is lovely and amazing. I want to spend time with them, so that life balance. I don't know. These were written quite some time ago and I still work 7 days a week, John. I mean, I'm very comfortable in my office and working, and therefore health has to come into that. I'm at an age and stage in life where I want to make sure I'm healthy, because I want to live longer and enjoy and be mobile and have my brain there, right? All the things that go along with that. So the whys of doing this are just that, but then how do we get there and how do we accomplish those whys are different at different stages, I think.
A couple of our first podcasts on this series, they were the second generation who succeeded their parents, but in two completely different models. We had a brother and a sister, and then we had two sisters who in two completely different ways took over their parents' team, and both of them have thrived in both of those ways. So I think we'll probably do an episode sometime where we bring together the people looking for successors and the people who are succeeding these successors. And I think that would be a super valuable episode. Well, Mary, listen, you have a tremendous team, a tremendous culture that you've worked very hard to build. Certainly, you've got what all of us have, which is the healthy part of an ego. I didn't see anything unhealthy there. That is we all try to keep that part in check, but you're very relatable, and I know that we all learned a lot from you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the show. If people want to connect with you, if they've got referrals to Southwest Florida, and also you have a short-term rental company there too, right?
We do. It's called Paradise Coast Vacations. So started this year. So we're super excited about that. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. What's the best way for people to connect with you if they want to after listening?
Mary Bartos on any platform that you want,
Awesome.
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and simply mary@bartosgroup.com is my email. So love to do that. Love to give back. John, thank you so much for having me, and more importantly, for asking some of those tough questions. I hope that your listeners get the value out of it.
Oh, 100%. All of us certainly will. Really appreciate it, Mary. If $1 billion remains your goal, we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Mega Team Mastermind. I hope you found some nuggets of wisdom that you can use to leverage your real estate team to make an impact and to build a legacy. A huge thank you to our incredible guest and, of course, to our sponsor, megateammentor.com, where you can get a free detailed assessment of your real estate team's health, including a free customized scorecard that will quickly and objectively diagnose the strengths and weaknesses of your real estate team business. That's megateammentor.com for your free real estate team health assessment. If you enjoyed the show, I would consider it a personal favor if you would subscribe or leave us a review so that we can get this podcast out to others who want to make an impact and leave a legacy. I hope you'll tune in to our next episode for more leadership insights, strategies, and stories of success and failure. Until then, this is John Tiller, and as always, I'd like to speak an ancient blessing on you as we go. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace.